Awesome, awesome. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Stewart's Opera House's hosting of Spoken and Heard. My name is Devin Sudman. I'm the education director here at Stewart's. I have black curly hair, light brown skin, and dark brown eyes. I'm wearing my black baseball cap tonight, a black sweater, and a black t-shirt. Stewart's Opera House is committed to our mission to be a regional leader in the arts community, a center for public expression, and an economic development partner for Southeast Ohio. We acknowledge that our historic theater sits on the traditional homelands of the Shawnee, Adena, and Hopewell peoples. We recognize the ever-present systemic inequities that stem directly from this painful history of colonization and commit ourselves to respecting and reconciling this long history of injustice. Stewart's is committed to being more intentional in the role we play for racial justice. We also commit to being more inclusive of people historically and currently marginalized based on identity, including gender, sexuality, class, and heritage. We wish to publicly express that hate and systemic oppression have no home in our organization. I'll be dropping a donation link in the chat. There it is. And you can also visit our website to find out more about upcoming events and educational opportunities. I will be monitoring the chat this evening, as well as keeping an eye on our recording here. And now, for what's most important, I want to introduce Kari Gunter-Seymour, your host this evening. Kari Gunter-Seymour is the Poet Laureate of Ohio and a recipient of the 2021 Academy of American Poet Laureates Fellowship. Her poetry collections include A Place So Deep Inside America, It Can't Be Seen, which won the 2020 Ohio Poet of the Year Award, and the chapbook Serving. Her poems have appeared in numerous journals and publications, including Rattle, One, the LA Times, and the New York Times. Her work has been featured on Verse Daily, Cultural Daily, World Lecture Today, and Poem a Day. A ninth generation Appalachian, she is the editor of I Thought I Heard a Cardinal Sing, Ohio's Appalachian Voices, and the Women of Appalachia Project's anthology series, Women Speak. She is an artist in residence for the Wexner Center for the Arts and a 2021-2022 Pillar of Prosperity Fellow for the Foundation for Appalachian Ohio. Visit her website, which I will share in the chat, www.KariGunterSeymourPoet.com. Please join me in welcoming Kari Gunter-Seymour. Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Devin. I'm so happy to be here tonight with everyone. And welcome all of our friends who are attending and all you folks who will eventually be out there in YouTube land. We're so grateful that you're with us and we're very excited. This evening marks the beginning of Spoken and Heard's 4th year of performances and our 2nd year here at Stewart's Opera House. And I want to send out a heartfelt thank you to Devin and to the Stewart's Opera House staff for hosting us through these past, what I call the tricky pandemic years. And I want everyone to know how very kind and special the folks at Stewart's are. And I look forward to another exceptional year of poetry, story, and song. So as with all of these events, tonight's will be archived on Stewart's YouTube page and on my personal Facebook page. So please do tell your family and friends and colleagues so they can watch and listen and enjoy at their leisure. And then I also want to take a moment to send out a very special thanks to our Asl interpreters tonight, Nico and Joe. They are dancers of words, and We are all so grateful to have them. I am a pale-skinned woman with longish, straight, gray-streaked hair. I wear glasses. The rims are tinted dark green. And I'm wearing a maroon-colored sweater with cream and gray diagonal stripes. We have 3 outstanding reader performers with us tonight. Poets David Sanders, Savannah Sipple, and Tim Greene. Now you can find links to our guests' books and websites on the Stewart's Opera House homepage by clicking on the Arts Education link and then scroll down a bit. And I'll also place links in the chat for those of you who wish to purchase tonight, because we know now more than ever, our universities and small presses need our support. I want to remind everyone who's here with us tonight in our audience that we have the chat box available to all of you to add your thoughts and comments for each of our featured readers as they present their work. And there'll be a short question and answer session after the reading. So go ahead and type in your questions to the Q&A, or you can type them in later in the chat window. Okay? And now, David Sanders is the author of 2 poetry collections from Swallow Press, Compass and Clock and Bread of the Moment. For 20 years, he was the general editor of the Hollis Summers Poetry Prize and was the founding editor of Poetry News and Review. Originally from Hiram, Ohio, Sanders received his BFA in creative writing from Bowling Green and his MFA from the University of Arkansas, where he also did postgraduate work in translation. His poetry has appeared in numerous journals, including the Hudson Review, the Southern Review, the New Criterion, and the Boston Review. A former bookstore owner and publisher, David retired from the English department at Ohio University in 2019, and he currently lives in Athens, Ohio. One of my dear favorite poet friends from Ohio said this about David's poems, Kathy Fagan. She says, David's poems, beautifully balanced in this new collection, Bread of the Moment. They reach as deeply as any I know, achieving the emotional clarity of poets like Robert Hayden, Robert Hess, and W.S. Merwin. This is wise, expertly crafted work, facing mortality with humor sufficient to the need and with reverent attention to memory, nature, and the poet's art. David may have come from somewhere else, but he's ours now. And I'm so pleased to welcome Athens' own David Sanders.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Devin and Stewart's. And also thanks to the good folks at Ohio University Press. I'm sitting here in Athens in my study. You can see the books behind me. I want to start with the first poem in my new book. It's called Politics, A Walk Through the Woods. Watching the train go by behind the barren trees, you thought it wasn't enough simply to see it pass. You ought to know what's on board. You looked at the cars for evidence, cattle, chemical, something else. What's in those boxcars, you asked yourself? Empty, full, the squeal of the wheels against the rails rounded the bend. The speed also was a clue. You were unsure, and so you guessed. Let's say your guess was right. How would you adjust your view? You cast your gaze to the downed trees that littered the woods, an orange fungus inching up their trunks like embers, jewels against the gloom. Somewhere, barely audible by then, the train. The next poem is called The Blue Danube, and there's a reference to Wurlitzer, which refers to the brand name of an organ. Um, the Blue Danube. Because the canary was very young, if not exactly hardly hatched, a novice when it came to song, its owner, also new to the endeavor, followed the pet shop steps for training. She kept it away from the kitchen hearth and left it in the living room winter light, where it listened alone in its cage to the record she played, pulling from the reaches of heredity the array of notes rendered by flute with Wurlitzer accompaniment. Finally, it started its full-throated singing. What it trilled was nowhere near the waltz's tune, but rather the faintest of approximations, the way a child, hearing the indecipherable words of the world, shares a slurred babble of its own with an invisible friend. The bird sang and sang at the record's prompt, and its owner, stirring a steaming pot over the stove, was as pleased as any pet parent when she heard. The next poem I'd like to read is called Waiting to Happen, as in accidents waiting to happen. Waiting to happen. If the city demands too much of you, it pays to pay attention. Even given the right of way, obeying the light, you can be yanked out of your shoes. Don't dare gawk at the glass-plated bank that stands there doubling your vision of everything, where even your own rippling reflection is waiting to walk. It can drag you down the street and run you over, knock out your teeth, shatter your humerus bone, and that's if you're lucky. A stray moment is all it takes, as you know. A luminous thought, an unfamiliar voice shouting hello from the opposite curb, the truck at best a blur out of the corner of your eye, and you too plucky and small for it to heed. The size of the place doesn't matter. Wedding day, bird trapped in a flue. Although we were in Florida, it was November, so it wasn't hot. Still, the morning of my sister's wedding, we found my father in the motel tub, where he had evidently spent the night, clutching his sheet and pillow, pajama-clad. It really wasn't that much cooler there. He was sobbing, but it sounded like laughter. You might have guessed it was the thought of giving his daughter away, or maybe something cruel my mother had said to him the night before. But it seemed more than that, a confluence inside him like a bird trapped in a flue with no hope of escape, beating against itself in desperation. I had never known him to cry like that, breathlessly. I felt within myself that welling heave, which asks for nothing less than my surrender, and wish now that I've passed his age that day, I could tell him so. The suffering of birds is another thing, and dwelling on it doesn't lessen it. It magnifies. In any case, by breakfast, he was mostly fine, and the day a celebration otherwise. This next poem is called Matinee and refers to going to see a movie, and in this case in Philadelphia. And there's a reference to the L train, which is a name for the elevated commuter train in Philadelphia. Matinee. To stumble into the glare of an afternoon, that's what's chilling. Adjusting to the sun while bearing the vessel of your last 2 hours out into the streets, where tedium intrudes without motif or variation. You've bought into a temperament, and blinking Carry it like a cane that you no longer need. It looks so good on you, you think. Spring days in Philly, I stalked the old city before my evening shift began. The soundtrack rumbling is from the L train or a dream. Passers-by paid me little heed, clandestine camera, shadowing them until they turned a corner and I picked up the stride of the next. This was the point the two stages convened unsustainably. Whose story is it? Whose do you choose? Like any dream, the one begins to wither while the other safely asserts itself. Block by block, bit by bit, I lost my marquee billing, my walk-on part reprised in that same old script, with the widower on a bench feeding pigeons and squirrels on the green behind Independence Hall, the buses wobbling over the cobblestones, tourists in tri-cornered hats, soft pretzels in hand, taking pictures of it all. The next poem is called The Break-In, and there's a reference to a pipe, and that's a tobacco pipe, not like a lead pipe or something. The Break-In. He dared himself to force the door. Once in, he maneuvered room to room, past outdated kitchen appliances, shrouded couches and porcelain figurines, and radios at room temperature. Sunlight chewed through the drapes' dry rot. But as soon as the pipe, the calabash bowl of burnt sienna, found the boy's hand, he scooped it from its resting place, a drawer long closed, which he had opened in this house abandoned by the heirs of its owners, and slipped it into the pocket of his pants, then glided out to his waiting bike that took him coasting past the corner filling station, the church, the town hall, downhill toward home, his eyes tearing in the whistling wind, and kept it hidden among his worldly possessions for most of the rest of his life. His pipe, not his pipe. This poem is called The Slide, and it's about an event that happened a dozen years ago or so in Athens here, where a boulder rolled off a hill into a residential area. It's called The Slide. When the boulder slid off the hill behind the armory, I was in bed a mile away, reading back issues of the London Review of Books. I'd heard nothing, but it crushed a car and came to rest beside somebody's poor front door. No one was hurt. Heavy rains must have pried it loose from the soil. Neighbors claimed it sounded like thunder. Then they saw electrical sparks and thought, fireworks. The folks inside the house watching TV said the slide felt to them like a mini earthquake, no doubt. Bleary-eyed partiers uptown hopped from bar to bar. And if the car horn blaring from on high registered with any of them, it only implied that a distant alarm was riding the spring night air. Neighboring homes were evacuated. It weighed about 100 tons, city officials estimated. Someone could have died. So around Athens, there's a bike path that circles 3/4 of the city. And I like to take walks on the bike path at different parts of it. And this poem was inspired once by a walk behind a Kroger and Walmart, where there's trees along either side. And this happened in winter. It's called Abandoned Nests Exposed by Winter. There they rest as if they were the season's meager fruit. Once you begin to notice them, they turn up everywhere you go. The boulevard or backyard, the dog walk or supermarket parking lot, and lower than you might expect, barely out of reach, braced in the branches like frozen balls of knotted twine. They make you think about yourself, how your productive work was done out of sight, camouflaged amid the foliage of years, protected and incubated, how it hatched and fledged, flew off never to return, and how mollusks, likewise, live busy and blind along the ocean's floor until their tumbling shells wash up at the brazed feet of Midwestern visitors. And then you remember how once those feet were yours. The next poem I want to read is called Election Day Raccoon. And there's a Japanese proverb that acts as a epigraph here. And that is, to know and not to act is not to know at all. Someone else would have stopped on the dark November road, found a weighted limb and clubbed the creature till it quit its senseless flinching, trying to right itself, fresh from the rear wheel of the car in front of me, trying to get back on its feet, which clawed the light of my high beams that caught its blazing eyes. I chose to leave it to its nature, in its nature, to let it feel itself drain into the nocturnal loneness that was its life. I chose for me and my stubborn sentimentality, more culpable than the unheeding car. That is who I am. That is what it was. Campaign signs sprung out of the darkness along the sides of the road leading back to town, chanting in their temporary mischief, vote yes, vote no. It's another poem that takes place in the autumn. It's called Autumn and the End of Autumn. The hornet's nest at the peak of the tree is empty of its community. What peers out like an eye in its ripped mask is the sky in the shifting west. It cradles the air that has stung the flaky flask. Its citizens, whose task it was to paste the pulp into the suspended pavilion, now litter the ground surrounding the tree, buried among the leaves. Theirs is a quick season. Which brings me to you and how this old love, this new love in age, is like a love in war and contains war's urgencies, the risks that won't allow for rational acts, but is alive by being rash, that will not wait its due for fear of being done too soon. I went to get a haircut, and my barber shared the sadness of a tragedy of a well-known client, a pianist, who after the night's performance crossed his road to retrieve his mail and was struck dead by a car, and how the barber had a few final minutes alone with him to trim his hair one last time for the viewing. Every time is the last time. That's what the world keeps teaching. Well, I'll lighten it up a little bit. It's a poem called Letter to the Editor. What do you want me to do with the news now that you've given it to me? Can we please, for example, dispense with the talk of fascists and communists and who was one or the other for a while, at least on Sunday afternoon? Listen, there are birds singing and lawnmowers, radios, and kids on the next block screaming and laughing. Maybe they are magnifying the rays of the sun on the bodies of ants. But what do you want from me? Scale back your events, current, recent, and otherwise, and reattach the flap of flesh you've pulled from the face of history. Stitch it up. Let it heal. The days are short enough as they are. We learn, if we're lucky, to be creatures of the seasons we're meant to be, while it still means something. As it is, I'm reading the papers for May 8th, and it's June 15th. Please let me worry instead about the conspiracy of weeds choking my garden. The world is turning roughly 1,000 miles an hour. It's all I can do to stand in place. Thank you, really, for giving me the news. Now, please, take it back. This poem is the only prose poem in the book. It's called Utility. All the kitchen drawers all over the world, with their rubber bands and thumbtacks, postage stamps and twist ties and clipped cartoons, business cards and plumbing receipts, with their seed packets and dried roses, their color swatches and chewing gum, their artist palettes and their unopened letters, calculators and calipers, animal hides and lace trim, false teeth and baby shoes, their foreign coins and their blue jay screeches, buttons and takeout menus, broken marriages and calorie counters, guitar picks and calendars, modeling clay and coat hangers, their exhaust pipes and alarm clocks, early deaths and their paperweights, perfumes and dog collars, step stools and vacuum attachments, their receipts and cut flour food, their flashlights and souvenirs, and their magnifying glasses and their passwords, their seashells and naps, their frames and blueprints, their shopping lists on the back of envelopes, and their restless nights, all will be emptied one day. Three more poems. This poem is called Dear Vulture. Dear vulture, who sits outside my window, resting on the dead branch macrameed with vines, your serious, silly head red and rubbery like alien genitalia, don't wait for me. I'm not going anywhere soon. Dry your wings if you want, like some farcical symbol of mock authority, but don't think hanging around will win you first dibs on me. I'm not sick or lazy. I'm reading, which I know sometimes looks like sleep, which in turn resembles death. I understand your confusion, and seeing you does make me check my pulse, but it's a nice day. Cool, breezy, few clouds, and the sky is yours to hang in, yours for the taking. God, if I could, I would, but since I can't, I'm not ready yet to leave. See, I'm waving my arms. Your turn. I'm going to read one more poem. This final poem was born out of my early morning anxieties. It's called Morning Sleet. You wake up because you think there are squirrels in the walls. You can hear their feet. It's not squirrels, it's sleet. You wake again as the frequency increases. The skillet in the kitchen is sizzling on the stove. You listen. You live alone, still sleet. Finally, you rise and see the world is insulated with a sheet of ice, glistening paralysis. Now you can breathe, unafraid. It's a better world than the ones you made. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, David, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I can certainly understand Kathy's reference to Robert Hayden and Haas. But you put your own like perfectly personal spin on it, on all, and it's just so wonderful. That's what the world keeps teaching us. I mean, oh my goodness. And your soothing voice, I could listen to your voice all night long. Quite wonderful. And I just have to say, I actually worked with the man whose car got crushed by that rock. And I can tell you that he was terribly traumatized by that, as were many in that neighborhood. The whole concept of the fact that that could happen just out of the blue, as you very vividly portrayed, that this giant boulder could come down out of nowhere with no warning. And so thank you for that poem. That's very centered on Athens. And I love the other poems that you directed or pulled directly from Athens, Ohio. So those who are no longer in Athens, who've come to the university and have traveled far away, will be very happy to read your poems and remember these wonderful things and some sad things about Athens as well. Yes. So thank you very much, David. And his book is Bread of the Moment. And again, that can be purchased from Swallow Press. And that's nested inside Ohio University Press. So you can find that right online, and you can find it on Stewart's Opera House education page. So moving on. Savannah Sipple is the author of What Would Jesus Do and Other Poems? This marvelous book from Sibling Rivalry Press, which was included on the American Library Association's Over the Rainbow recommended LGBTQ reading list. The collection explores what it is to be a queer woman in Appalachia and is rooted in its culture and in her body. A writer from East Kentucky, her writing has been published in Go Magazine, Southern Cultures, Split This Rock, Salon, and others. She is the recipient of grants from the Money for Women Barbara Deming Memorial Fund and the Kentucky Foundation for Women. Sipple is a professor, editor, and writing mentor, and resides in Lexington with her wife. And Savannah and I go back ways. She published a few of my very early poems during her tenure as editor of the journal Kudzu. And she has served as a juror and a staunch supporter for My Women of Appalachia project and its anthology series, Women Speak. I'm always grateful for that, Savannah. She's an amazing poet, educator, and just a fine human being. And I am beyond excited to have her here with us tonight. Savannah Sipple.
Thank you, Carrie. And I want to thank both Carrie and Stewart's Opera House for inviting me to read tonight. So I'm excited. I am a white woman, quite pale, who's wearing turquoise headphones right now and light blue glasses and a gray shirt. I am going to read from my book tonight, WWJD and Other Poems. The book is set, it's about coming out and being Appalachian and coming out. And it's, of course, about being LGBTQ and being a gay woman, but it's also about self-acceptance and also about my complicated relationship with the place where I'm from. And so the first poem that I'm going to read is called What We Tell Ourselves. And I'll start there. It's a poem that's in different sections. So, section 1. I show him my pay stub, my weekly deposit slip, reasons for needing $10. This is how it has to be. This is working 9-hour days on my feet, barely a break to come home, cook, sweep, mop, wash, wait on him. This is watching it fall around me. Him sitting while shingles fly with every wind, gutters hanging loose, leaking, the back porch needing the new gate. This is him watching me while I push mow, rake leaves, rake limbs. This is him. This is his, and I have no business asking for help or money. I shouldn't expect him to. The woman's place is to submit. This is fitting to the Lord. 2, you can walk away and not look back. 3, I'm too tired. It's too expensive. It was his time to go. I'll pray for you. I had no idea this was coming. I've never raised my voice or a hand to her. She has another feller. The water is safe. Things are different for a girl. You can't do that. I won't let you. I will knock your head off. I will take your car keys. Do you hear me? I don't want to. I'm not able to. She's wanted this for a long time. She asked for it. Deep down, I come by it natural. I come by it honest. 4, you can stay and survive. 5, you'll never get married if you can't handle a man wailing on you. If you don't change your attitude, don't shut up, don't wear more dresses, makeup. If you don't learn to cook, don't stop being bossy. You better stop trying to show how smart you are. Stop tearing your legs up playing sports. Men like legs. Stop sleeping in sports bras. Men like big breasts like your mother's. Things are different for a girl. Whatever this is, you better get over it. 6, you can leave. 7, I never wanted to stay. I never wanted to leave. I never wanted to come back to gravel dust. I could not wait to leave. I could not breathe in the shadows. I could not stand the good country boys, could not stand the Bible thumping teenage girl humping men. I never could keep a secret. Their shit-eating grins scratch my back politics. I know I will never meet people as honeysuckle good as home. I know city neighbors will never love me as much. I know what the good country people say. I know the good curvy road. I know how my skin tightens when I have to go home. I don't want to go home. I don't know where home is. I don't know if I love the mountains. I don't know if I hate the mountains. I love to drown in the mountains. I hate the crooked mountains. I love the mountains. I hate the mountains. I love the mountains. I hate the mountains I love. 8, it's a choice. 9, on the long, dry days, I wish I had hit you. I wish I had reared back as you screamed, I'll knock your damn teeth out. I wish I had let it fly. I wish I'd cocked my fist to your jaw right as you claimed. I'll do it. I will. On those days, I wake with the copper taste of hate in my mouth. When I can't sweat it out cold, I can't hold it under the creak of me. I don't know which I hate more, your lack of follow through or my own. 10. Our anger is a lantern, this little light of mine. 11. Hang it in the family room. Man puts his hand to the flinty rock and overturns mountains by the roots. He cuts out the channels and the rocks, and his eyes see every precious thing. He dams up the streams so that they do not trickle, and the thing that is hidden he brings out to light. But where shall wisdom be found? 12. It's our fault. 13. Rid her of topsoil, cleanse the skin, blast it open with knife, with dynamite. The things we mine out are what kill us. Needle wire your way to the seam, dragline tissue, swift, strive for clean margins. Place small clips, metal clips to mark your spoil. Don't overburden her with waste. Use a drain for the slurry. What would we save if we didn't destroy the breast? Follow up with sponge baths, support groups, radiation, bumper stickers. Then you can reclaim what is yours. 14. You can come back. 15. She always was a little bit queer, they'll say when you show up at the funeral home with a full-on Leslie pompadour, black dress, and tights be damned. Still, you'll smile and tell them you're doing just fine, even after the good church folks stare at you side-eyed and whisper, backslider. 16. You can forgive. 17. When it all goes to hell, the holiest among them turn on you first. We'll open a red spine hymnal, saying, it is well with my soul, with my soul. It is well with my soul. 18. It's not our fault. 19. Once the mountains loved us. Once we loved the mountains. This next poem is called Thirst. I loved her from the first Sunday she wore that green dress to church. It was plain, cotton, forest green, and hid a hair above the pale back of her knees. The neckline came low enough for me to see something swelled underneath. I could see my hands sliding up her legs, my hands running up her sides, my hands slipping that thing right off. Quick, easy. I love that dress, and her breast swelled underneath, the way it clutched her body tight, just enough to see her panty line. My fingers wanted under her panty line. That dress was hot, but what really got me was the way she wore it, free, unconcerned, her body happy with itself. The dress, only an afterthought. This one is called Somewhere There's Her Tongue. In my mouth, my love's tongue is in my mouth. My love has her tongue somewhere else in someone else's mouth. She comes home aroused, giggles, slips her tongue in my mouth, laughs. You're just like a guy. Her V-neck shirt's right up to show lace panties. Somewhere else, my love's lace panties are on the floor. Below my mouth is her back where I kiss her spine. trace vertebrae with my tongue. Somewhere in my arms, she sleeps topless. Beneath her nails, my back, my neck, she is underneath someone else, somewhere. She says she doesn't want to share me, says she was somewhere, coffee with a friend. My love lets me curve my body into hers while she snores. She sleeps somewhere else, somewhere different from where she says. My love turns her head when I lean in to kiss her. My love says somewhere, I am a lover, but lover, I am not here. The last section of my book, Jesus sort of arrives on the scene as a wingman. And it's also where the title of the book comes from, because a lot of the book is about sort of reconciling my faith and my being gay. And so I'll read a few of these poems. Jesus and I have lunch. Jesus drinks PBR with his burger. I order bourbon and L8, a BLT. As we leave, he says, we should do this more often. This one is called, And the Word was God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was fat. In the beginning, I was fat. In the beginning, I was lean and long, carried 2 weeks past due, and wore preemie clothes. And then I chunked up, baby fat, a fat baby. Baby, I grew big boned, grew 6 inches taller than the other little girls. Grew hips and thighs and breasts before my time. In percentile on all the doctor's charts, I grew. I knew I was too large, too loud, too mouthy for boys. I knew even then I loved girls. I knew by how loud the boys said no. I wanted them to say no. I wanted them to say yes. I wanted to feel like I could stop burying myself in my body. My body grew large. My body grew larger. A walk-in closet. I stood on the inside, hiding behind dresses. On the outside, Bible verses and Jesus. Men who made sure I heard them tell me my body was not my own. My mind was not my own. But it was. So I started to drag myself out. I kicked the door open. I kicked it down. Haven't looked back. Look, don't look back. Don't look back at the beginning. In the beginning was that word, and that word was God. The word is not God. I am God. I am that word. I am God's word. I am still fat. This is called Jesus and I Are on a Break. Meanwhile, a blonde walked in wearing a royal. I'll start over. Jesus and I are on a break. Meanwhile, a blonde walked in wearing royal blue leggings, and I'm in love with her. Her thighs, the way they slope out on the sides, fat tugging muscle. There's a healthy curve there in the back that stretches up to an ass that will fill my hand. Help me pull her close. Her leggings remind me of a woman I met at a workshop. The way her eyes explode when she's excited, the way her body flexes when she moves. And the last time I saw her, the weight she gained looked good, real good. And I should text her. But there's a bank teller who wears ties every day and always says hi, even if she's working the window while I'm at the counter. And I want to tell her I'd jump that tall counter if she'd say yes to coffee with me. But right now, my coffee has gone cold. A youth pastor at the table next to me says you should be thinking about boys, to a young woman. I'm not. She's getting ministered to and looks awful cute in her Buddy Holly glasses and Chuck Taylors. I'd like to do this thing on purpose. scoot my chair right over there, let my hands show her all the things she could think about and feel, things a hell of a lot more fun than boys. Meanwhile, Jesus, camped out across the table from me, looks up from his novel and latte, says, "Girl, you won't know until you try." Okay, I have one more that I'm going to read. And it's the last poem in the book. It's called Jesus Rides Shotgun. We go balls to the wall, windows down, aviator sunglasses always on. I drive like a bat out of hell, do donuts on sun-dry highways, 180s on ice-slick parkways. Sometimes when I drift, I think this is the end. I used to be afraid. Sometimes I still am. Maybe. Don't hit the brakes, Jesus says. Turn the wheel. That's how you know the way you want to go. Thank you all.
Oh, Savannah, I swear you never disappoint. And I'm gonna tell on Savannah now. She's not feeling that well. And she's really a trooper tonight to come and read for us. And oh my goodness. And I hope you'll look in the chat, Savannah. There are a lot of messages to you. And just a couple of things that really popped out to me. You better stop showing how smart you are. Oh my goodness. And let's see. The things we mine out are what kill us. Oh my God. And when it all goes to hell, the holiest will turn on you first. And that is just so truthful and honest. And thank you for your words tonight. And again, this is just an absolutely lovely book. I've set it down here, but WWJD and Other Poems from Sibling Rivalry Press. Okay, so you can order your copies there right from the small press instead of going through one of the large online book sellers. Let's not do that. Okay, our next poet is someone that I've grown to admire greatly. Timothy Greene has worked as editor of Rattle magazine since 2004. He's the author of one book of poetry, American Fractal, from Red Hen Press, a contributing columnist for the Press Enterprise, and co-founder of the Wrightwood Literary Festival. He lives with his wife, Megan, and their 2 children in the mountains near Los Angeles. Now, here's what I know. Tim Greene is one of the most dedicated editors that I've had the honor of meeting. And I met Tim at one of his open mic events very early in the pandemic. He was trying to gather us in and give us some purpose during the pandemic. And then I somehow from there managed to get myself a guest spot on Rattlecast and simply had the best time with Tim. And that night, Tim got to know a little more about Appalachia, and I got to know some things about life in the hills of LA. So here's what else I know. Tim and his wife, Megan, do everything at Rattle. For years, I thought he had a staff. No. They personally read every poem submitted. Every poem. So let's think about that for a minute. Okay, every week they get hundreds, sometimes thousands of general submissions, along with some who are focused on the individual tribute sections of the magazine. On top of that, hundreds of poems for Poets Respond are submitted weekly. Then there's the monthly Ekphrastic Challenge. Oh, and there's the Rattle Poetry Prize and the chapbook contest. Thousands of chapbooks submitted yearly. Tim publishes an anthology specifically for young poets ages 15 or younger every summer. There's a critique of the week, the weekly open mic, and Rattlecast. Okay, so I'm exhausted just thinking about it all. I know y'all are too. But Tim and Megan wake up every single morning and keep making dreams come true for poets all over the world, including me. And I am beside myself to have him here with us tonight, Mr. Tim Greene.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Carrie, and thanks to Stuart's and for Devin for having this. I just, I would follow Kari Gunter-Seymour anywhere she asked. She's just the sweetest person in all of poetry. But the truth is too, I love this stuff. I love getting to listen to poets share their work, and it's just wonderful hearing poets from Savannah and David. I fell in love with poetry sitting in the back of the library at the University of Rochester. Well, poets would come to read, and I would sort of hide in the back behind the stacks on the couch there and just listen and let the words swim over me. And it's the same feeling here. So as a reclusive person, I don't get out much, but I love the everything being online and getting to participate and listen and hear so many poets around the world. It's just wonderful. So thank you for Stuart's Opera House for doing this, and for Carrie for hosting. It's just a wonderful thing. I'm so glad that the world allows this to happen. It's great. I'm Tim. I'm in California. I'm up in the mountains, so it's actually really cold. So I have a flannel shirt on. Our office isn't well insulated, and it's actually like 25 degrees outside. It's dark in here. There's a picture of Rattle, one of the covers from an old issue behind me. And I have a beard, longer hair in the beard than my head, and I'm a white skin person, kind of like a middle-aged dad / lumberjack or something without the muscles. And that's how I look right now. So I thought I would read a few poems from my book. I only have one book, American Fractal. So I read a couple poems from that and newer poems as well. Maybe finish out with a poem from American Fractal too. So this first poem is, I think, the oldest poem in the book and the first poem in the book. And what I love about poetry is the sort of magical mystery of it. Like, it's a way that we somehow pull meaning out of the void and understand things that we don't know we know or something. And this poem is 20 years old, and it was written about a dream I had about my wife, Megan, before she was anything other than an acquaintance. I didn't know anything about her, except for she was this girl in a poetry workshop I was doing, and online. And she appeared to me in a dream, and then the dream became this. And there's one weird line here where I say back east, talking about something back east. And I was in the East. I was the same place I grew up when I wrote this poem. And I remember when that sort of spilled out, I was like, what is that all about? And then a couple of months later, I was offered this job moving west. And so somehow that appeared in here. Now the East is back east. So I don't know. There's this magical thing that happens with poetry. And this is a poem that I always think about in that respect, because it's like a prescient kind of weird wonder thing going on. And this is called The Body. And this is a train poem, I call them. They go really fast and there's no punctuation. So I'm going to try to go slower than normal, but let's see how it works. The Body. In the dream, I wake to a poem about trains, what it is that insists, that crawls, clamors, the window pane claps shut against a wind, outside bare branches and a dry heave, and I rise. Over the swelling resolution not to rise, I rise. Consider the light switch, consider the electric blanket warmth, I rise instead. Go to the window, which is no longer a window, but a box full of moonlight. And down there in the meadow, just a handful of star specks in the foxglove. Her hair is blue grass, and the first thing I think of are the wet walls of Howe Caverns, that tourist trap back east, the pipe organ, the bridal altar, the river Styx, stalactites and stalagmites fusing, the slow settle of limestone, bicarbonate, a blind bat on a billboard, unfurling leather wings, unfurling night, unleashing a gust of supersonic transients, and old dogs call to supper, 20 miles to go. 15, get your wallet ready. And there it is again, the unmistakable whistle, the bleating, the bleeding, the letting off of steam, and she's by the tracks with something in her hands, a silver shining thing, and through the silent distance, through the square hole in my bedroom wall, I know there's nothing left to call it but hope. Though it's just a quarter, a nickel, a dime, General Washington's hope, your 25 cents worth of hope, a handful of gumballs, a plastic egg full of costume jewelry that was in a tiny finger green. It's just a sedimentary, the sentimental dream token hope, the hope you go to hell, the hope you forgive me, the hope you remember, to hope at least love. And she sets it down on the far track as if dropping her hope into the cool slot of a jukebox. The low clink clambers up from inside my throat as she steps over both tracks, over the shimmering, shining thing, over the glittering, fluttering, tumbling, turning thing, now lifting at its edges, the thing that's always more than whatever it is, because there's the whistle again, the rumble, a distant thunder, because the past can't hold the future. The present rumbles on, 5 miles, almost there. Hush now. It sweeps past 2 geometric lines that never touch, and there's the lamplight, the steam stack, the hot metal glow. And at her heels, this unnameable sadness, this burden, the eternal space there between the train's first passing and the wind that follows a second later to wake the body from its only available dream. Yeah, so that is the first poem in the book. And then, let's see. So the next poem I'm going to I'll do, because I wanted to do sort of one of those kind of poems, then a slower poem. This is After Hopper. And I was at the USC at the Stack Star. I used to go once a week for my MFA program. And I would just go to the library and pick a random book and then a book that I wanted. And one of the things I was looking through the stacks at the library, I found this book of nothing but poems written after Edward Hopper paintings. And it was a thick book too. It was like 400, 500 pages long, if I remember right. Maybe I'm exaggerating my memory, but just poem after poem written after Edward Hopper paintings. And one of the poems was written by the professor I had at the time, Robert Mezzi. And so for the workshop this week, I wrote this poem trying to figure out what it is about Hopper paintings that that generate poems. And that's what I feel like poems are tools of understanding. And so this is an example of just how you sort of come to understand things through poetry. Because I think I understand Hopper paintings now. And it's the process of writing this poem that made it work. So anyway, you see a lot of different Hopper paintings come into this. So it's sort of a sweeping look at Hopper's work at the same time. So this is After Hopper. She says
Timothy?
Yeah.
This is one of the interpreters speaking.
Oh, sorry.
Would you mind speaking like 3 or 4 times as slow for us?
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, about 3 or 4 times as slow would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry. I go too fast. I know.
Okay. Thank you. It's appreciated.
Okay. Yeah. So so I was so this is After Hopper. I'm gonna try to go slow. I'm sorry. After Hopper. She says that everything is after Hopper. That posh hotel, you looked about to slap her, but never did. Sometimes she'd wait at night in her blue robe, face folded like the note you didn't leave crumpled in a coat pocket. Sometimes she'd stand in broad daylight, naked before an open window, flesh so pale and round and full it seemed about to pull a tide of ruddish men up from the street. And mostly it's the red dress, the cut straight, sleeveless, loose. In her mouth there's only lipstick. She says you never even see her talk, but just about to talk, about to smile. She says that every moment is a jail. This diner is her prison of endless light, the ceaseless hour always getting late, yet no one moves. The cigarette remains unlit. The busboy doesn't lift his hands. You could write 1,000 lines, she says, on all the things she never does or has. How she seems so sad, she might have cried. How you only see her almost satisfied. This is my Edward Hopper paintings poem. Let's see. So since this book came out, I haven't written any other books. And what I always loved about poetry was writing just for fun. Like it wasn't anything I ever planned on doing. I thought maybe I'd write novels, like science fiction novels or something. But I don't know, but I just love writing poems. And so over time, I wrote more and more poems. And what I love now is that we have this Rattlecast that we do. And the Rattlecast has an open mic at the end. And we have a prompt every week. So I get to write a poem for the Rattlecast every week. And this is poems that come from the Rattlecast. So this is Poetry Man Wins the Battle. And the prompt for this week, for this poem, was to write a poem about a superhero. And one time Megan gave me a coffee mug for a present. She went to that one of those ceramic stores where you paint on a coffee mug, and it said Poetry Man. There was like a little, weird graphics and things that she'd painted. And so I had that cup for a long time until I dropped it and it broke. And so in the prompt for the week was to write a superhero. I wrote Poetry Man. And this is Poetry Man Wins the Battle. And we'd also interviewed, what's his name? The old guy superhero poet. So this kind of takes off after him a little bit too. This is Poetry Man Wins the Battle. But at home, the dishes still stack near the sink in reckless stanzas. Past due notices pile by the door like so many rejection letters. Their SASEs not even stamped. How he'd spend hours changing commas to periods, paring each digit's expression down to its essence. Crime doesn't pay, but neither do poems, is all they say. But poetry should only be used for good, in fighting his old nemesis, Professor Prose. Poetry Man plops onto the couch and clicks on the news, hoping to compose his weekly Poet Respond. And there he is again, the professor, in eyewitness iPhone footage. Half his lines are already broken by a relentless pair of iambic feet, but his blocky, symmetrical face stares right into Poetry Man's studio apartment. You may have won this time, Poetry Man, he says, but one day you'll see that we agree. Even if I rhyme half the time, it's just prose with line breaks. Then he laughs maniacally as they stuff him into a squad car, and Poetry Man and jams the TV. So that's my Poetry Man poem. Let's see. I think this poem, what was the prompt for this week? I don't even remember. Maybe I should have written down what the prompts were. But this is a poem for Ötzi, which is the oldest mummy man they found in the Ötztal Alps. He's from 3,000 years ago, and they could look through his his forensics. They could cut through his stomach and examine what he'd eaten and sort of reimagine his last days. And what they found was that he fought in a fight and was stabbed and fled for days because the wounds had closed a certain amount. And then he'd eaten sort of little bits of food. And then when he got to his last end of him, he went up in the mountains. You could tell by the pollen that was there. And then he had a big meal of meat and lamb and things like that. And right after that, someone shot him in the back with an arrow. So it seems like he got in some kind of fight and fled. And his pursuers, he thought he'd escaped, and he didn't. And I'm just always fascinated by Ötzi and thinking about that. And I think there was a news article that week about how the museum was reopening, maybe after the pandemic. I'm not sure what. I don't remember. But so this is thinking of him there at the museum. This is Ötzi. You've made a museum of me, stacked stones like blue ice at the feet of my mountain. We pile our stones on the peaks where the wind speaks and the voices of the gods. Am I one of your gods? Is this why you brought me here? I whisper, but there is no wind. Your torchlights never flicker in this smooth room. Everything echoes. What would you like to know? The secrets of time? What is time but the spine of a mountain bending back? And what is the story but the arc of time? You know mine. You've made maps of my meals. You've measured my wounds with every kind of meal. I worked with metal. I know the rocks that weep and the power of the blade. But I'll tell you what you know. I climbed down to the village, and the smoking huts were too much smoke. I killed 2 painted men with the same arrow, wrestled with a knife and fled. They found me by my fire 2 days later, my belly full of meat and bread. You found me still full of that meat and bread. I'll tell you what you really want to know. Was I happy in my primitive life? Was I happier than you are now? Yes, so happy that I fled. So happy that I built the flame and ate the bread that brought the arrow I knew was coming. So happy with life that the ice was all I had left to turn to. So there's a poem about Utsi. I think I'll skip the faster poem. I have another train poem here, but let's do another. I think the prompt for this week was to write about the circus. And this poem is from a year ago or so, a year plus maybe. And so you can maybe guess as I read this who it's about. This is the walking circus. The walking circus waddles more than walks under the weight of his own never-ending spectacle, always holding up the hooper's hips, the lion's untamed mane, the sad elephant just as heavy and hologram, and the clowns, so many clowns in their fleet of tiny cars, the menacing makeup, all those massive, clumsy feet. While in his mind, 3 motorcycles whirl incessantly in a steel-meshed globe of death, the thunderous buzz of the single piston engines bouncing on the walls of his skull, all of it under a big top, flopping against his brow as he crosses a Florida fairway, alone now, looking for his lonely little ball, having lost it somewhere deep in the rough. That is a poem for someone. What do you say? So this prompt was to write a poem about, I should say that Megan comes up with all these prompts, actually. Like, we really do everything ourselves. And one of Megan's jobs is to come up with these prompts every week. So, and she writes poems too, and she's a better writer than me. I don't know. She should be on the show too. Although I shouldn't say that because I don't think she'd like to. But this is Hobby Horse. And this is a poem. I think the prompt for that week was to write about a lost toy or a forgotten toy or something like that. And so this is a hobby horse that I had in my house when I was, I don't know, 5 years old or so, just in the closet there all the time. And I didn't think about it again until this poem came up. Here's Hobby Horse. You find it now exactly where it always was. It sits unplayed behind a door within the closet of your mind. That's where it stayed, even when you were of the age to clomp around the upstairs hall on 4 imaginary legs until this poem came to call. Now that door is cracked. A shaft of light illuminates the horse's once familiar face, hand sewn with love from winter socks. Of course, it's emblematic of what's gone. You're close enough to smell the must where fabric moths have laid their eggs. Its button eyes are filled with dust. You don't remember riding it, not once. The toy box where it always slept. A guardian content with just the watch it kept. Let's see. So here are 2 climate change poems, maybe, or I guess you could say. This is a short poem about the little disputes we have in a marriage, I guess. This is Argument in Another Language. I think that was the prompt. I'm not sure what the prompt was, but Hans Island is this little island where who fights over it? I can't remember. Is it the Dutch and the French? Oh no, the Canadians and the Dutch. Yeah, so there's this disputed island, and every year or so, the Canadians go and replace it and put some Canadian whiskey, and then I think it's the Dutch who also have a claim to it, come and replace it with their own alcohol. And so this is a poem about marriage, using that as a metaphor. Another argument in another language. The thermostat hangs in the hall like a disputed island in an icy strait where soldiers hike from their frigid ships over the bare rock to trade their flags and bottles of whiskey or schnapps. Welcome to Canada, you say, each word pressed deep into the rubber button, a laundry basket balanced on your hip. Willkommen till den danske O, I reply, passing by after walking the dog. And here is I think the prompt this week was to write poems with idioms or an idiom. And so this is Idioms for a Heat Wave. The glass straw popped a dozen, and she gave me the cold shoulder as I slimed the door. But it wasn't the first time I'd smoked that bullet, and I never cry over curdled milk. I was on a cold booze chase, withering without her. She was my iceberg in a teacup, my always AC in the sky. But I was really farming at the mouth. Boil your eggs in a basket, I yell, driving off, adding in sun to the jury. Time fries and the heat was up. I won't beat a dried possum. She was the best thing since iced bread. But what was I, braised liver? It was all rain in the shade until it wasn't. She hid the whale in the shed. She broke a keg. So we cooked 2 birds with 1 stone. Live and burn. Yeah, I was over the weather. Let's see. So this one is, the prompt here was to rewrite a fairy tale. And so I looked for some fairy tales that I'd never heard before. And I'm sure everyone's familiar with as Bjornson and Moe, but I wasn't because I'm an ignorant person. And so I read this, The Giant Who Had No Heart Inside His Body. It's one of the famous, I think it's Norwegian fairy tales. And so it's like Bjornson and Moe are like the Brothers Grimm, except from Norway. And I just love the story, The Giant Who Had No Heart Inside His Body. And so I rewrote that as a poem. The giant who had no heart inside his body didn't know where to hide it. It was a big heart after all, as big as a Cadillac, as loud as a kick drum. And where do you hide such a thing? He tried the barn, wrapped in layers of aluminum foil and linen, hung on a hook from the highest beam. But still, the field mice found it. He woke that night to the tickle of their tiny feet inside the huge hollow of his chest. His own laughter chased him through the darkness until he lifted the barn roof and scared them off. Next, he tried the bottom of the lake, sunk with stones to the deepest part. The surface rippled softly with every beat of his mighty heart, but the sound was muffled and the fish well fed. For a while it worked, until the cellophane began to leak and the hole inside him filled with water, a well overflowing, and he wept for days. When the hungry princess arrived, it was raining. He noticed her bright umbrella. Eat, he said, having no other choice, his voice rolling down from the clouds. And so she ate, slice by slice, bite by painful bite for a year, until no one anymore might find it. Let's see, and this one was this was a poem about, you read a poem about a color. So I looked up some colors, and there's a really interesting story about this caput mortem, which is the color, it's sort of a dull brown that was used from the dust of corpses. It also called dead man's head. And so it's controversial, of course, because these are like cannibal pigments in famous paintings. And so here's a short poem about that. Dead man's head. Think of all the places you could be. A layer of dust at the bottom of the sea, an urn on a mantle hoping to last, a corpse in a box or burnt on a raft. Why not ground into pigment whose ashes improve liberty leading the people still looked on at the Louvre? Let's see. I think I have one more prompt poem, then I'll do one more poem from American Fractal. This one, the prompt for the week was to write an echo verse poem, which is a poem where there's a really quick rhyme at the end of each line. So you'll hear that as I read this. And coincidentally, the same week, it was a few weeks ago when Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, denied Sirhan Sirhan his parole. And no matter what you think about what Sirhan did. I think that's a really tragic figure. If you know anything about his background, his parents were born in Jerusalem, but they fled to Lebanon, I believe. His older brother was killed by a tank when he was a little boy. And so his older brother died. They sought asylum in the United States and moved to Pasadena. And then his sister ended up having leukemia. And so he nursed her back to health, or in her, I mean, she was dying, and he took care of her while she died. And then he loved horses. So he ended up being a stable boy at the Pasadena racetrack. And someone offered him a job or offered to train him as a jockey. And so he was excited. This little guy, he's only 5'5" and like 130 pounds. And so he's excited to be a jockey and go into training for that. Early on, he fell off, hit his head, and had a traumatic brain injury, which might have caused him to do what he did. Or he might have been under hypnosis, which is a possibility if you look up MK Ultra. But this poem is an echo verse poem. I mean, Sirhan, that name just asked you to write an echo verse poem, right? And it's also written with many lines from his notebook and from interviews, the few interviews that he's done. So a lot of these are his own words. It's almost a found poem. Sirhan, under hypnosis, with lines from his notebook. Counting backwards from 10, again, 9. I remember being there in the kitchen, an urn full of coffee, awfully hard to see through the fog of 8. Wait, there was a girl, beautiful, sir, her hair black as a mare's mane, a flame burning over this gorgeous dress. Yes, follow me, she said, and I'm a puppy, a guppy, a jockey about to be thrown. Alone now, she hops on the counter like 6 sticks of dynamite, fired like a 13th shot, hot, very hot. I don't know what to say. Play it cool, I think, but my artichoke heart starts to boil, and the bluebird's words are of smoke. Sir, I don't drink. Think was all I could think. Blink, and I pinned to the table, unable to move. The weight of the trigger finger, something beyond my control. My role, I understood when they said dead. We don't need another ruby. You see, still, I'll never understand this hand with a mind of its own. It wrote, quote, RFK must die. RFK must die. Why? When the range master says shoot, shoot. When the range master says shoot, shoot. Please pay to the order of. And actually, I think I'm out of time. So I think that's gonna be the last poem. The last one's too long. So thanks everybody for listening, and sorry for going too fast.
Oh, please. We could listen to you all night too. This has been an amazing evening. I couldn't even keep writing down things that caught my eye because I was so mesmerized. Tim, thank you so much. And I knew it would be. I love 25 cents of hope and a handful of gumballs. And then later, I hope you forgive me. I mean, that is just a little poem, just those few words. And when you were talking about poetry, man, how wonderful was he? And your little pocket, it's just prose with line breaks. I love that. I mean, that's just so classic and wonderful. And what an incredible night we've had. Well, I'll tell you what I'd love to do is ask if anybody in our audience has any questions for any of our readers tonight. And if you would, just everybody go ahead and turn on their videos now. And we can have a little bit of conversation with each other. And if folks in the audience don't have questions, I have questions, but I'm going to give y'all a chance. I'm going to look in the chat. I'm seeing things like incredible night and wonderful reading, and people saying they remember some of the prompts. And I will say, I am so jealous, Tim, that you can just write all these new poems and they're so good and you can just read them.
Well, the amazing thing about writing, the amazing thing about writing one a week is that you have one a week, and then so you can pick the ones that work.
And you're ready for another book, because I know your first book was 50 poems. It was huge. And so now you're going to have no problem to just probably have a 150-page book this next time you do a book. And I hope you're doing one soon. Okay, well, I'm still not seeing anything in the Q&A. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So I'll ask my silly questions. And I'll start with David. You know, David, I noticed in your when I was reading about you that you are now retired. I know you worked all those years, and how I knew was through, you know, the press, Ohio University Press. So how are things now? I mean, do you write differently now that you're retired? Do you spend more time, less time writing? Has anything changed, or maybe just tell us about your practice?
Well, my writing actually changed in the last 10 years. And, you know, my first book came out 5 or 6 years ago, and that was a culmination of the 30 previous years. And a lot of those poems were formal in nature, or blank verse. And I decided that, you know, having written for 40 years, I just had to sort of go on my own instinct when I was writing. And so I'd write poems quickly in one of those blue books you get for taking exams that cost 10 cents. And then I would work them up and then make them into broadsides, you know, for myself, and put them on my wall and just leave them there for months at a time. And so I think the process changed over time from this sort of very well-wrought poem to the more, you know, I was writing for myself by that time, and most of the poems in the new book reflect that. So that's the biggest change. You know, the retirement just came along. You know.
Well, that's awesome. I'd love to hear that, because I know sometimes people say they retire and they kind of lose touch with things. That didn't happen to me. It sounds like it didn't happen to you at all either, because you were already going through that transformation, and you just kept it going. And are you doing a lot of traveling at all with pandemic? I guess.
No.
Yeah.
Just on the bike path.
Really drag, but yeah, but we will soon, won't we? I hope, anyway. Okay, well, I'll move on to Savannah then. So I'm curious about this, Savannah. I'm sure others would love to hear about it. I know you were a featured poet at the Dodge Poetry Festival. I think it was last year. So I wanted to know if you might share a bit of that experience with us. I would think that would be, I mean, even though it was virtual last year, I'd still think it was just an amazing opportunity. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. It was virtual, which was different, because usually it's, you know, in person, and it's a huge festival. But it was really fantastic, because I got the opportunity to read with poets whose work I probably would have never encountered. Some of it was pre-recorded, some parts of it were live, and so it gave us the opportunity to interact with folks. And it's archived on their YouTube, so it's out there. But it was really such an honor to be picked to participate. You have to apply and all of this stuff, and so I hope to be able to go again when it's in person, hopefully. I really have a lot of respect for the work they do, and they do a lot of work in the schools, and so that's something I'm hoping to be able to participate in when it's in person again. And so it was just a great experience. It was wonderful. And then to also see all these other poets read in their groups, and I don't know, it's a rare opportunity to be able to see so many poets and participate in that. And of course it was across multiple days, and so I didn't get to catch everything, but it was fantastic.
I can only imagine. I was thinking that too. What an amazing experience that would be. And it seems like such a lot. It just seemed like it was so robust and so full. The organizers must be just pretty fabulous. So.
Oh yeah, they're fantastic.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah. So that's something you apply for then, obviously, so people will know if you're interested, you can apply for that. Okay, well, I've got one for Tim, and so I kind of danced around this. I know you are super busy, and we didn't even talk about your marvelous scientific brain. So you could either talk about that because it is marvelous, or I did wonder, are you kicking around the idea of coming up with another collection anytime soon? Or do you have opinions about that, or just something you might want to share with us?
Well, actually, I don't know. I don't have a lot of interest in writing a collection. I don't care. Like what I loved about poetry.
I knew you were going to say that.
I was a science major, and it was just a fun meditative thing that you could do. And I love that experience. I love the workshop. Like I was a molecular biology major, but then I was doing a poetry workshop with every professor at the University of Rochester where I was. And I loved writing a poem every week and then having a little workshop where we'd read it and everybody talk about the poem and we'd hear other people's poems. I just loved that. And then when I wrote a book, I thought, well, now that I am a poetry editor, I better be serious. And so I'll put a book together, and then it became serious. And I don't have any interest in that. So, so when we did the Rattlecast, which we've been doing for almost 3 years now, or 2.5 years, and we had a prompt at the end, that's just my heaven. That's all I want to do. And so maybe I'll put together, I also have small kids, and maybe when I have more time without having 2 kids that are, 7 and 11, maybe I'll start putting a manuscript together, but I just don't have it's a super low priority, and I just don't care. Like, I like writing a poem every week. I like reading and listening to poets share their voice and sort of inhabiting someone else's body that we do. But for public, I just don't care. So
I really admire that. I do. And I do love that story about, your first love was science. You were very left brain, it seemed, but then you had this marvelous right brain thing going on all along. And so you are really in the perfect job, aren't you? Because
I do. I feel very blessed. I really do.
And you do make a lot of folks' dreams come true. So we do thank you for that. And it's amazing the amount of work you do. I mean, I know I really didn't touch on all of it. But the two of you together, you and Megan, oh my goodness, it's astounding. And if afterwards we need to talk, as if Megan does want to do some reading, I know all of us here would love to hear her read.
I would love her to, but I don't think she does. So I shouldn't have said that.
Okay. Now, I don't want to get anybody in any trouble, but it's out of the bag now, so it's just a thought. So
yeah, but if you want to listen to Megan's poems, she contributes one every week at the end too, and we sort of have a competition of who's better. I think hers is better about 75% of the time, I would say.
Okay, and you're not prejudiced either, so that's.
I'm not. Yeah. I'm very honest.
I know that's true. You are very honest. There's no doubt that when you say you like something, it truly is. So, well, we're running a little bit late tonight. I think we're going to have to not have the open mic tonight, and I hope nobody's disappointed. And we will, do it next time. And it's always if we have time. But we just had such marvelous, fabulous readers tonight. We didn't want anybody to quit, did we? We could stay here for hours. But I do look forward to seeing everyone at our next event on March 17th. And I will be hosting editor of Adroit Magazine, Heidi Seaborn, and Long Beach, California's beloved poet, Donna Hilfert. And then we'll have Athens' own singer-songwriter, Dan Canterbury, and he's fabulous. I cannot even tell you enough. April is Knoxville's Linda Parsons, and Stella Sue Lee, who was Rattle's original magazine, or one of the co-founders, I think, is what she says about herself. And she says the most wonderful things about you, Tim. I mean, she goes on and on about you. So they're very proud of you and having selected you to carry on the torch. Also out of Kentucky, Bernard Clay, and he's also a poet out of Swallow Press at Ohio University. And May is Appalachian's own Marianne Worthington, Doug Van Gundy, and Nima Afashia. So I can hardly wait. It's every month is just going to be just supreme. So I hope you all be back. Again, I want to thank all the good folks at Stewart's Opera House, and especially our charming host, Devin, for taking such great care of us. I also want to thank everyone who came tonight and participated in the chat, and to all those who will join us later on YouTube. Thank you so much for supporting these events. Your support is very dependent on how our grantors look at us and the work that they do, the good work that they do. So we thank you so much for your patronage and continuing to come back again and again. Literally thousands of you are watching these YouTube programs, and we're very grateful for that. And again, I want to remind you to purchase the books of those who are with us tonight. That not only supports them, but also their small presses. Remember to submit your work to Rattle. There's just so much opportunity there. So definitely do that. I put the website on there several times tonight. And last of all, I just want to say, stay safe, everyone. Be vigilant. We're over another hump. We're going to have a little more freedom again for a while, I think. So party it up while you can, but remember to be careful and vigilant. And we'll see you back here in March. And thank you so much to David Sanders, Savannah Sipple, Timothy Greene, Stewart's Opera House, and all of you out there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Carrie.
Good night.